Good day, everybody. My name is Paulina 𝗟𝗢𝗏 and I am part of the board members of 𝗟𝗢𝗏 which is an organization that seeks to help out people who have lost their kids during pregnancy or shortly after pregnancy. Because the subject is very broad, we are now getting more inquiries from foreign people living in Iceland about the subject. So we have gotten licensed psychologist 𝗟𝗏𝗰𝗲 to talk about it, specifically when a baby dies during pregnancy. I hope that this talk will be very helpful to any of you.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me here for this interesting topic that I want to start talking about gender perspective. We have this effect, the 𝗟𝗏𝗰𝗲𝗏 effect. It's about the Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg when she got pregnant for first time. She was referring as not an easy pregnancy. Her feet went up 2 sizes. Google was already a huge company with a huge car park. She had problem walking across. The referent, she noticed that the company needed pregnancy parking. And she felt embarrassed that she had not noticed before until she experienced this need her own. And the reality is usually that does take a senior woman for problems like this to be fixed. Modern workplaces are riddled with these kind of gaps. For example, doors are too heavy for average women to open. The windows are difficult to open as well. There is small legal issues that are not the end of the world, granted, but nevertheless irritated. So women are usually having a battle in the daily life at work, at home, and public spaces, but especially pregnant women. It's not always easy to convince someone a need exists if they don't have that need themselves. It's important to consider the gender perspective, as men and women have different immune systems and different hormones, different corporal structure. And historically, it's been assumed that there wasn't anything fundamentally different between male and female bodies other than size and reproductive functions. The reference man for humanity is a Caucasian man aged 25 to 30 years old who weighed 70 kilos. But of course, does not represent humanity as a whole. There was an interesting exercise by the scientific Sheila Eisenstein in 1988. And she was saying that if the pregnant female body were the model of basic human, would immediately have to become more complex and sensitive to human diversity than it is. Pregnancies range from being uncomplicated and uneventful to being seriously disabling to mother-to-be. And because some women, like all men, will not become pregnant. Pregnant women are usually excluded from clinical trials of research, so there's a lack of solid data to treat pregnant women for pretty much anything. We can notice now when the COVID situation with the pandemic, there was a lack of solid information about how all the protocols for pregnant women. There is no data. And this is difficult to treat pregnant women in pretty much anything. can say that a woman lawyer is exactly the same as a man lawyer. A woman cop is just the same as a man cop. And a pregnant woman is just the same as, well, as her. This is how described Carolina Criado in her book, Invisible Women. Anyway, she was referring as well an interesting research about the cop in the United Kingdom. When women cop have difficulties wearing the vest. It was so difficult, it was not adapted for the women breast. So every time we notice there's a lot of lack and sensitivity about the women's body. As well as because women's body have been a taboo for centuries. The problem with this is that it means it often takes years for women to seek help and many endure unnecessary suffering. And this example about the COP women in the United Kingdom, it was just recently when one of the women talked about it. So the other ones start to ask for a different vest. It's just an example of these differences that we have in the female body and male body.
So I would just like to mention something here. In 𝗟𝗏𝗰𝗲 we have a project which is called 𝗟𝗏𝗀𝗃𝗃 or kick counts in English. And this is a project that we are running just to help out people to listen to their own body, like women specifically. If you feel that there is something that it's not right, just seek out help with a specialist because you never know.
Yeah, this is such a fantastic initiative. We need to encourage women to talk more openly about the body, to help normalize the issues that more women seek help sooner and stop being like a taboo to talk about our bodies. And then pregnancy and motherhood is associated with a series of hormonal, physiological, cognitive, and social change. The lack of adaptation to these changes leads to the appearance or chronification of psychological problems, such as depression, anxiety, stress, which often go unnoticed. Since the woman gets pregnant, all these changes started, and we must too observe what is going on if the woman can adapt to all these changes and avoid the chronification of psychological problems. Pregnancy, like abortion, takes its meaning from the women in whose body the pregnancy is unfolding. That means the meaning is just individual, and there is such a diversity in the experience as many women exist. When a baby dies during pregnancy, the pregnancy loss often takes you to a very lonely place. As you begin to offer search for answers, logic, and sense, it can feel as if nobody can fully understand your pain, not even your partner if they're together. You might despair and feel that very few people would have any idea what it's like to walk in your shoes. But there's a lot of more women experiences the same situations that we think about it. And there's really few data about all these situations. Physical and emotional pain felt in the body after the pregnancy loss. It doesn't matter the circumstances of the miscarriage. There's gonna be always pain, physically and emotional. The physicians, the doctors will help with the pain, physical pain. As well, there is professionals as a psychologist that can help to relieve the pain, the emotional pain. Pain is a naturally elicited emotion. Suffering is all the stuff we add to audit with our minds. After a loss in pregnancy, pain is such a natural emotion. But then we started to take different position about our situation and thinking so much about it. So the suffering could appear in our lives. Pain is such a perfect and normal response according to the situation. Here it's important to talk about emotions. Emotions is a physiological experience or a state of awareness that gives you information about the world, and a feeling is your conscious awareness of the emotion itself. We have such a life event, and there's that physiological experience, shake, sweating, heartbeats. That is an emotion. We should recognize it. And because of this physiological experience, then we give a behavior. Could be crying, get worried. This is a behavior. This is the external experience. But emotion is such a private experience. And the important is to recognize that the physiological responses. The polygraph machine can identify the different physiological responses accompanying different emotions in order to detect lies. We can get the same responses in different circumstances. That means the heartbeat, the sweating, the shaking. But they're common in the same emotions like sadness, of course, tears, and happiness, smiling. The experience of grief after death is a human, universal, and normal reaction that occurs within a sociocultural context and is frequently addressed by health professionals. Because as we have in emotional responses, then we react to these responses, to these physiological experiences with behaviors like cannot focus, get angry easily, cannot sit still, have difficulty sleeping, feel very tired, cry, worry, feel sad or guilty, as well have changes in appetite. The physiological response are generated by the autonomous nervous system. So we must recognize when it comes from inside the body, physiological response. However, it would affect our behavior in our context, with the people close to us, at work, at the school, with our families, with friends. The behavior, after what we feel in that. Every loss is unique. We have to, it depends on the circumstantial factors of the loss. The death, how did the person find out? The mom in this case. What was the experience like? Some experiences are more traumatic than other ones. It's important as well to consider the relevant historical variables, like the background of other losses and how the persons deal with the previous losses. As well, it's important to consider history of psychological problems. There are some vulnerability factors that affect to every individual in different ways, like the support networks and social support, and social support, risk behaviors, general health status of the person, and other current problems. In this case, it's really relevant about the support networks and social support. It affected especially to immigrant women, as the lack of the presence of another women in their family, like moms and grandmoms, to share this experience, somebody like get close and get confident to talk about it. It's natural to experience pain in the loss. In fact, it was same audit, someone did not experience difficult emotions in response to this event. The issue becomes what we do once the emotion arises, once we identify these physiological experiences. More people try at least some of these strategies: yelling, trying not to think about it, avoiding people, places, or situations, staying in bed, isolating yourself, giving up, drinking alcohol, tobacco, drugs, starting arguments, blaming or criticizing oneself. What else have you tried? This response appears when we are just experiencing the physiological responses of our emotions. Then it gets complicated when there are attempts to avoid thoughts and feelings, memory, physical sensations, and other internal experience. Pushing away difficult thoughts, feelings, and emotions is like to push a beach ball under the water. Probably it would work in the short term, but then doesn't make them go away. It can make things more difficult. It happens the same with emotion if you try to avoid them. That's why it's important to find someone to talk to, or even a professional help. Some people are really fortunate to find a good friend or to have the family close to them, or somebody who has the same experience. As well, those women that are with the partners, it's really important to try to understand each other's feelings, but don't expect to grieve in the same way. Grief is such a personal thing, and we are all different people who deal with things differently, even if it's the same experience. Remember, we have our own personal history and resources. When things get complicated with the emotions of the pregnancy loss and considering to get professional help, we can have a psychological assessment and to identify if it's a psychological problem already. A psychological problem is there are inappropriate behaviors that attempt to give the most adaptive response, like the behaviors we were talking about before: drinking alcohol, avoiding friends, isolating. That is inappropriate behaviors. It is essential to know that behavior and its frequency of appearance. To consider if we're talking about a psychological problem, it's important to get the frequency, the intensity, and the duration of the behavior. Probably, I don't know, a weekend you feel like to drink a beer and to forget about your situation and your recent loss. It's okay, but if you're getting this every day, every night, every time you're feeling these uncomfortable emotions, then we're talking about a psychological problem. People with complicated grief often avoid others, as well the places associated with loss, due to the intense anxiety that the mourners people. We can evaluate if we're talking about a complicated grief. We have some suggested psychometric instruments. They are kind of reliable. We have the inventory of complicated grief, have a scale to measure maladaptive symptoms of loss. There is as well the acceptance and action questionnaire, the symptom checklist 19, which is pretty much to check on the general health of the individual. And the questionnaire from the World Health Organization to measure quality of life. This is the suggested psychometric instruments to detect if there is a complicated grief.
One question is like, what will be benefit us to know all or answering this test?
Remember that there's natural emotions in response of the experience of the pregnancy loss. You know, like to be sad is, of course, it's natural. If you don't feel sad because of this experience or painful, I told you physically or psychologically, it would be something really weird. So we must to make a difference, an evaluation, if it's a normal pain or if it's getting like chronic pain, emotional pain. And if it's a maladaptive situation, if you're having maladaptive behaviors, because as you're avoiding the feelings and you're avoiding your thoughts, the scope of the vital experience, the vitality and your life is getting narrow. And from here to the depression symptoms are just one step, or probably to severe depression. You know what I mean? It's important to observe if it's a normal response according to the situation, or if it's getting really intense and frequent. I told you, like, probably once you feel like really sad and you met a friend and you watch her in the distance and you avoid her because you're feeling sad, just probably once. But if it's a habit that you're always avoiding your friends and not even talking about it, there is not an adaptive behavior. And of course, all the psychological problems with race and suffering. And of course, there is when the mental health must to be observed here.
Okay, thank you for the answer.
What you were asking for is to know if these situations are making our life, our experience of the loss of pregnancy worse and suffering and miserable. We must to avoid these behaviors. These are non-healthy behaviors. They're unhealthy behaviors. And it get like chronic, frequent. We were talking about frequency and intensity. Now there is like the health compromise. We're always trying to avoid thoughts, feelings, memories, physical sensations, and other internal experiences. As I told you, the risk of depression, severe depression is really high. That's what the instruments are suggested. Healing on an experience like this, it requires not just regulating and expressing painful emotions, but also enhancing your capacity for enjoyable emotions. That means that you can really engage again in the life of the persons next to you, your family, your friends. You're watching them, you're enjoying the company. You're really noticing simple, beautiful things, being curious of the life. and really being present, not being just having avoiding behaviors. So it's really important to enhance the capacity for enjoyable emotions again after this experience. There is a vitality in this approach that it makes room for all manner of thought, feeling, and sensation, bringing to bear the large variety of human experience that is available. Instead, you carry the story of your life. You can use it, as to get impulse, always in the direction to committed actions, important for you, like family, friends, studies, work, whatever is important for you and meaningful in your life. As well, the emotions has a purpose. Every single emotion, the primary emotions has a purpose. Sadness, the behavior tendency is like to slow down, withdraw. And sadness tries to communicate there has been a loss. And the need that indicate is healing. And we must to listen this. Like when you listen your stomach, when you're hungry, when you're thirsty, your physiological responses are giving you a message. They're trying to communicate. And they're trying to get a satisfaction for a need. In the case of sadness, they indicated the need is healing. The fear, anxiety, the message is like get away or avoid. Trying to communicate danger or threat. You need to be safety to feel safety. It depends of how traumatic what the experience for the women. It would feel this fear of anxiety every time, probably when going to hospitals or to the doctor. That's when we're talking about the post-traumatic stress. Because the life of the women was compromised, and sadly there was a loss of a life. So the message of fear, anxiety is to keep safety. And we must to recognize that emotion. We must to make a room for that emotion. Don't avoid it. Don't avoid it with behaviors that complicate your life. The anger usually needs like to defend ourselves. Someone is taking advantage, it's not fair. The need to satisfy is to protect, to put boundaries, shame, the tendency, the action, the behavior tendencies like to hide or to cover up. And the message, the communication of the emotion is like, wow, there's something wrong with me. And the need to be satisfied is social acceptance or approval. They have guilt. The action tendency is to make amends and solve the problems. The message, I have done something wrong to you. And the satisfaction to be needed self-respect. So we have the pleasant emotions. Can you see from all these primary emotions, there is love and joy, like just pleasant emotions. Usually now the pop psychology referred like positive emotions. In psychology, we don't have positive or negative emotions. We have pleasant or unpleasant emotions, and all of them are valid. We must to recognize and to make a room. If you make a room just to the pleasant or positive emotions, there could be the perfect path for maladaptive behaviors and no genuine emotions. We have some resources if you're interested to get more. This is a really nice book, When Sadness is at Your Door, and talk about how to make space with sadness. Remember, it's a basic emotion, sadness. We need to make a room to this. Just to listen, what is the message and how can I satisfy the need? It's important as well as the emotions give us physiological responses that could be really unpleasant, that we recognize them, identify if I'm sweating, breathing, shaking. I must to recognize the physical experience here and now. And the most effective and cheaper technique to relax is the breathing. To breathe as the organism inside is like in alert because of this autonomous response because of the emotion. If we not given enough oxygen to the organism, we have such a bad moment. So it's important to recognize the emotion and to try to relax and to ground, give um, more space to please an emotion, but recognize the primary one and to listen to the need to be satisfied. This is a really nice book as well, The Other Side of Sadness. Hopefully it can help you. And please, if you have any other question, and if you would like to have more resources, some videos and things, just please put in contact with Paulina or any of the peers in the association.
So I would like to ask a few questions regarding the presentation. So you were mentioning at the end about breathing, that we need to learn how to breathe. Which breathing techniques would you recommend?
One really effective that I learned, and actually, I remember in some teachers using with kids, you inhalate with rhythm and exhalate 5 times, following the shape of your hand. Deeply breathe. And this is a grounding technique as well, that avoiding you to hook in feelings and thoughts that are not helpful, to give an adaptive behavior. Remember, if we're always hooked in these feelings and thoughts, we're not having an adaptive behavior, and actually it could arise in psychological problems as I cannot get along with the environment, with the people near to me, and cannot be effective at work and school. Another one is like as well, you can inhalate in 4 times, hold it for 1 second, and exhalate in 6 times. Always with the diaphragm breathing. Try to not breathe because you get intense most of your body, and your body is feeling all this tension, and try to give more physiological responses, like there is an alarm, something is happening, something really, really bad, and probably is that you just walk in, I don't know, next to the hospital when having such a bad experience. But just come back to yourself and grounding, and try to breathe yourself. Don't get hooked on your thoughts and feelings.
Okay, just as a summary of what you talk, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like finding out how to cope with when you have lost during the pregnancy, finding out your feelings, dealing with them.
Emotions, the primary emotion, the basic emotion like sadness, of anxiety. Remember that the feelings is your awareness of this emotion when you start to complicate things like I'm feeling worried, I'm feeling this, I feel this. But to connect with the primary emotion and to try to satisfy the need of that emotion. Emotions are our friends. Emotions are not potentially dangerous for us. Actually, they are our friends to help us.
I have some questions that we got asked from people who have lost, and I actually would like to remind any of you that we have in 𝗟𝗏𝗧 3 close Facebook groups. So, like Alma was talking, it is very important to share the experience with others who have already gone through it. And this is something that has helped me a lot personally to share my experience or the experience that me and my husband had. So you can find the links of these Facebook groups in our website. So we are going to put also the links to all of those groups in the description of this video. Well, one of the questions that we got asked by one couple is how would it be a new pregnancy or trying to get pregnant? How to do it so you will not be afraid that you will lose again, or what will help you out not to have the fear of getting pregnant again?
But this is pretty much is related to, once and again, to the body of women. This is the body of the women. Um, how intrusive was the experience? How aggressive was all the medical procedure? If women feel like treating it by something again, it's gonna be difficult. So it must be healing first. If there was an intrusive and aggressive medical experience, you have to. Then we were talking about post-traumatic stress. If it was not that aggressive, it's gonna be pretty much talking with your doctor, getting always the evidences. Remember, you have to live your mental inner experience and to go to the facts. Always go to the facts. The facts will give you adaptive behaviors. But don't keep in your mental experience just having these emotions and feelings and thoughts of catastrophe. Okay, just go to the evidences with the professionals, and if need support, you need to get support.
What can you do when you feel that you cannot keep on going ahead with your life? You know that you are like feeling really bad because you just lost a child.
Remember that we were talking like when you're avoiding the feelings, the unpleasant talks and feelings and places and friends, the scope, the vitality is getting so narrow, and that could appear as depression, anxiety. It's pretty much that. That's what is really important, to always observe your behaviors. Must be we cannot control the emotions, we cannot control talks, but we can control what we're doing. If I ask you right now, don't think about a white, beautiful, big polar bear with a black, pretty nose. Don't think about it. Don't bring it to your mind. How was it? It was successful. We cannot control. We can not control feelings or emotions. If I ask you right now, go outside and get in love, we cannot control that, but we can control what we're doing, our behaviors. And if we always doing the things that are valuable for us, we're gonna feel satisfied, even when the pain. Yeah.
Another question that we got is how to help the mom who lost the child, like how to give the best support, or the spouse might be thinking he has already been making a lot of effort, but I mean the woman maybe doesn't feel it has been enough. So how to give that support that the woman needs?
It is important to validate the experience of the women. That was we started talking about gender perspective. It's really, really difficult to make others to understand and to feel empathy when the situation happens to our one body. It happens in my one skin. How can I transmit to the other ones? So sometimes use company without judgment and unconditional, and of course organization help probably at home, or if there are more kids at home, trying to care of these kids meanwhile the woman is resting. And as well, we cannot control what the others feeling, thinking, or behave, but we can control what we're doing once and again, and we can influence to them. So yeah, I would suggest like understanding, validate. We started this talk about this gap of data, this gap of sensitive about the women's body. So I think it's such like an exercise to respect that, all these changes, because there are not just physical or visual changes. There is really, really physiological changes for women, the hormones, the strength of the muscles.
So we have two more questions. So what to do when people are approaching you and talking about kids? It's a very sensitive thing, just because you just lost your child. And then if you already have some previous kids, that they say like, oh, but you already have, like 2 or 3 or 1, like, So how to deal with this kind of comments, so to avoid conflict with other people?
Yeah, just as we talked before, we cannot control what people say or think or to do, but we can influence them. And to avoid conflict, if to avoid conflict is important for you, just behave in that direction. Even if it's like good shrinking, like just move to another direction, and a direction that is important for you. And it's really difficult. It's such a difficult situation, like for people to have appropriate messages or support. Even that's what all these kind of groups that Paulina that you were talking, there are really important, because sometimes there are not understanding or real support from family or friends, because it's really difficult to understand if the person has not the same experience.
Then another question that we got is what to do when you already have a kid, then you lose. Like, do you tell your kid, that they have a sibling that is no longer living with them? How do you deal with these sort of questions for older kids, or just maybe they are not at all, but few months old, so you are just thinking like how to say it, or to avoid mentioning the child you lost, or keep the memory alive?
This is close related to your own healing process. If the mom or the parents has already healing and satisfied process, the kids would learn. The kids, children would learn from the care providers. We are the reference for them always. So if the parents, if the mom is already in a physical and emotional state to talk about it, just do it in a very natural way. If you don't feel like you can do it, just get like a support of the grandma or a friend. And once you talk about it, the kids probably would talk about this topic more than once, and they will come with more questions probably. And it's important just to answer what they are asking, not more. And according the language, according to their age, and but always with facts, like to avoid like don't say, oh, the grandfather is asleep, or your baby brother is asleep, and they close their eyes, because the children will be afraid to go to sleep. They will be afraid to don't wake up like the baby brother or like the grandfather. So try to avoid all these kind of examples. Just talk like with evidences in a language level of the child.
Okay, so we of course have many more questions, which we are not gonna touch today. We will leave this for another talk. It was really nice hearing from you and, well, or how to deal with the loss of a kid. As I mentioned before, all the resources are going to be linked in the description of the video. In the name of 𝗟𝗏𝗧, thank you very much, Alma.
Thank you to you, and congratulations for all your labor, and thank you for having me. And please, any question, just let us know.
You are always welcome to send your questions directly in our Facebook page. There is always someone who can answer in English or Icelandic, and the same via email. Have a nice day.